It was never about the money. It was about who he was trying to save. The coins hit the metal desk one by one, soft, uneven clinks that barely filled the silence of the station lobby. A few quarters, some wrinkled dollar bills, and a handful of nickels that looked like they had been carried in a small pocket for far too long, the kind of money a child counts more than once just to make sure it hasn't somehow grown overnight. But it never does, and neither did the chances of what he was asking. The boy stood there, no taller than the counter's edge, fingers still curled like he hadn't fully let go of the last coin, his hoodie damp from a light morning drizzle that clung to the glass doors behind him, and outside, parked just beyond the curb, a German shepherd sat still beside a uniformed handler, unmoving, alert, like a statue that had learned patience instead of breath. His name was Rex, though no one had said it out loud yet, not in this room, not since everything changed. The officer behind the desk, Daniel Hayes, didn't look up right away. He had seen people come in with problems before, bills unpaid, complaints filed, lost items, broken things, but this wasn't something that fit inside paperwork. The boy's voice came quiet, steady in a way that didn't belong to someone his age. "It's all I have, please don't take him away." And that was when Daniel finally looked up, really looked, past the damp clothes, past the shaking hands, into the kind of eyes that had already learned what goodbye felt like. And outside, Rex shifted slightly, just enough to catch the scent of something familiar drifting through the automatic doors, rain mixed with asphalt, a trace of the boy he had once followed beside a taller shadow, a man who smelled of leather gloves and long nights, a man who never came back. The leash in the handler's hand tightened gently, not out of force, but routine, the kind that says time is moving whether anyone is ready or not. Daniel stood slowly, the chair scraping against tile, a sound too loud for the moment, and walked around the desk, each step measured, like he wasn't sure where this path was leading yet. The boy didn't move, didn't wipe his face, didn't beg again. He had already said everything that mattered. And outside, Rex's ears lifted, just slightly, as if the air itself had changed direction, as if something unseen had taken one step closer to breaking, and for a second, just one, the entire world seemed to wait, not for an answer, but for a choice that would decide what kind of story this would become. Daniel stops a few feet from the boy, close enough now to see the small details that do not lie, the dirt under the fingernails, the frayed cuff of the sleeve, the way the child stands not like someone asking for help but like someone bracing for disappointment, and for a moment the station noise fades into something distant, radios murmuring, footsteps echoing down a hallway, a printer spitting out paper that no one is reading. Because this moment has narrowed into something quieter. Something heavier. "What is your name, son?" Daniel asks, his voice lower than before, not official, not distant, just human, and the boy lifts his chin slightly. "Ethan," he says, then after a pause that carries more weight than the word itself. "Ethan Cole." And that name lands differently, not loud, not dramatic, but enough to stir a memory Daniel did not expect, a file, a briefing, a photograph pinned to a board weeks ago, Sergeant Michael Cole, K-9 unit, the kind of man other officers described with short sentences and long silences, dependable, steady, the kind who stayed after the shift ended. And outside, Rex shifts again, his posture tightening just a fraction as if the name has traveled through the air and found him. Daniel glances toward the glass doors, watching the dog for a second longer than necessary. The handler beside Rex notices and gives a small nod. The kind that says there is a story here but not one you can read on paper. Daniel looks back at Ethan. "That dog out there," he says carefully. "He belonged to your father." And Ethan nods once, fast, like he is afraid the truth might disappear if he moves too slowly. "He still does," the boy adds, correcting without raising his voice, and that is when Daniel feels it, not pity, not obligation, but something quieter, something that recognizes a bond that has not ended just because someone wrote it down in a report. Daniel exhales slowly, glancing at the coins on the counter again, at the small offering that was never meant to be enough, and yet carries everything the boy has left. "Ethan," he says, choosing each word with care, "there are rules about dogs like Rex. He is trained, he has duties, he cannot just be handed over." And he watches the boy's face not break, not crumble, but hold, like it has practiced this moment. Before, like it expected resistance and came anyway. "My dad said Rex knows good people," Ethan replies, his voice softer now, almost a whisper. He listens to them. And outside, as if on cue, Rex's head turns fully toward the door, his ears rising, his eyes fixed on something beyond the glass, something he cannot yet reach but refuses to ignore. The handler shifts his weight, sensing the change, the leash still loose but no longer just routine, and inside, Daniel feels the room press in again. The weight of policy on one side and something far less defined on the other, something that cannot be filed or signed or approved, something that waits in silence for a decision that will not fit inside any report. And for the first time since the boy walked in, Daniel does not see a problem to solve. He sees a line that cannot be crossed without losing something that cannot be replaced, and he is no longer sure which side he is standing on. Daniel does not answer right away, and in that silence something shifts, not outside where the rain has softened into a fine mist, but inside him, in a place shaped by years of doing things by the book, by the line, by what is written and signed and stamped, because that is how order survives. And yet there are moments when order feels too small for what stands in front of you. He glances again toward the door, toward Rex, and this time he walks. Slow, deliberate, each step echoing across the tile until the automatic doors part with a quiet mechanical sigh, letting in the cool air that smells of wet pavement and early morning, the kind of air that wakes something deeper than thought. Rex rises before Daniel even reaches him, not pulling, not barking, just standing with a stillness that feels like recognition. Like memory finding its way back without needing to be called. The handler loosens his grip slightly, watching closely. "He has been like this since yesterday," the handler says quietly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who has seen many dogs, but not many like this. "He does not respond to commands the same way anymore, not since Cole." And the name settles between them, heavy but familiar. Daniel crouches slowly, keeping his movements measured, respectful. Like approaching something that deserves more than routine. Rex steps forward, just one step, and stops, his amber eyes fixed on Daniel's face, searching, not for authority, not for command, but for something harder to define, something closer to truth. Daniel does not reach out immediately, he lets the moment breathe, lets the distance remain for a second longer. And then he extends his hand, palm open, steady, the way you offer trust without forcing it. Rex lowers his head slightly, not submissive, not uncertain, just aware, and then presses his nose gently against Daniel's hand, a brief contact, but enough to say that something has been acknowledged, something unseen has been confirmed. Behind them, through the glass, Ethan stands exactly where Daniel left him, small, still, watching every movement like it matters more than anything else in the world, and maybe it does. Daniel straightens slowly, his hand lingering near Rex's collar where a worn metal tag rests against thick fur. He does not read it, he does not need to, he can feel its weight without seeing the letters. "What happens to him if no one buys him?" Daniel asks without looking at the handler, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it said out loud. "He gets reassigned if possible," the handler replies, then after a pause that carries its own meaning. "If not, he goes somewhere else." No details, no explanation, just a quiet end to a sentence. That does not need finishing. Daniel nods once, slow, absorbing it, and for a moment he imagines Rex in another place, another handler, another command voice, and something about that does not sit right, not because it is wrong, but because it is incomplete. Like moving a piece without understanding the whole board, he turns back toward the door, toward the boy who has not moved, and as he walks inside again, the sound of his boots softer now, less certain, he realizes that this is no longer about policy or process, it is about something that cannot be reassigned, something that still belongs where it was left, even if the world has already decided otherwise. Daniel returns to the counter, but he does not sit, he stands there for a moment with his hands resting lightly on the edge, feeling the faint vibration of the building beneath his palms, the hum of electricity, the quiet rhythm of a place that runs on structure and certainty. And yet nothing about this feels certain anymore. Ethan is still there, exactly where he was, as if moving might somehow change the outcome. his small fingers now resting flat against the surface where the coins lie. Scattered, not gathered, not protected, just left there in the open like an offering that has already been accepted or already been refused. Daniel looks at them again, then at the boy. "Ethan," he says, his voice slower now, more careful. "When was the last time Rex saw your dad?" And the question lands gently, but it carries something deeper, something that reaches beyond simple information. Ethan swallows, his eyes dropping for just a second before lifting again. "The night he did not come home," he answers, and the words are simple, but they hold everything inside them. No need for explanation, no need for detail, just absence. Daniel nods once, feeling the weight of that answer settle into place, and for a moment the room seems quieter than before, like even the walls understand something important has been said. "Rex was there," Ethan adds softly, almost like he is reminding the world of something it should not forget. "He stayed." And outside, through the glass, Rex shifts. Again, pacing a single step forward, then stopping, his eyes still fixed on the door, on the space where something familiar should be, but is not, and Daniel follows that gaze, seeing not just a dog waiting, but something unfinished, something that has not found where it belongs yet. He exhales slowly and reaches into his pocket, pulling out a folded sheet of paper, worn at the edges from being handled too many times. He places it on the counter between them, smoothing it flat with his palm. It is a form, standard, official, the kind that decides outcomes with boxes and signatures, but now it feels different, heavier, like it carries more than ink. "This is the transfer request," Daniel says, not looking at the paper, but at Ethan. "If someone applies, if they meet the requirements, the department can release Rex." Ethan's eyes flicker to the paper, then back to Daniel, confusion and hope mixing in a way that does not fully trust either one yet. "I cannot promise anything," Daniel continues, his voice steady but quieter. "But I can make sure your request is heard." And for a second, just a second, Ethan's shoulders loosen, not relief, not yet, but the smallest shift away from defeat. Daniel slides the paper closer, along with a pen that feels heavier than it should, and Ethan looks at it like it is something fragile, something important, his small hand reaching out slowly, hesitating just before touching it, as if he understands that once he does, something will change. And outside, Rex lets out a low breath, barely audible, the kind of sound that does not demand attention but carries it anyway. Daniel glances once more toward the door, then back at the boy. And in that moment, the distance between what is allowed and what is right feels smaller than it ever has before, not gone, not erased, but close enough to step across if he chooses to. Ethan does not rush, his fingers resting on the edge of the paper as if feeling its weight before accepting it, the pen still lying untouched beside it, and for a moment he looks smaller than before, not weaker, but aware that this is no longer just a question asked at a counter. This is something that could decide whether Rex stays or disappears into a place where names no longer matter. Daniel watches him closely, not pushing, not filling the silence, because he knows some choices need space to breathe, the kind of space that cannot be rushed without breaking something fragile inside it. "I do not know how to write all the big words," Ethan finally says, his voice quiet but steady, and Daniel nods, leaning forward just slightly. "You do not need big words," he replies. "Just tell the truth." And that seems to settle something, not outside, but within the boy, his shoulders straightening just a fraction as he picks up the pen, gripping it a little too tightly at first, then adjusting, the tip touching the paper with a faint scratch that sounds louder than it should in the quiet room. He writes slowly, carefully, each letter shaped with effort, as if every word carries more than just meaning, it carries memory. Outside, Rex has moved closer to the door now, close enough that his reflection overlaps with the boy's silhouette through the glass, two figures separated by nothing more than a pain and a decision. The handler watches but does not interfere, sensing that whatever is happening inside is something no command can interrupt. Daniel glances between them, the boy writing, the dog waiting, and something about the symmetry feels deliberate, like a line drawn between past and present that is about to be crossed. Ethan pauses once, lifting the pen slightly as if unsure, then continues, pressing harder this time, and when he finally finishes, he does not slide the paper forward right away. He reads it once, silently, lips barely moving. Then looks up at Daniel with a question that is not spoken but clearly. There, Daniel reaches out, takes the paper gently, careful not to crease it, and reads, the handwriting uneven, the spelling not perfect, but the message clear in a way no formal document could ever match. It is not a request for property, not a transaction, it is a promise that Rex will not be alone, that he will still have a home that remembers the same voice, the same scent, the same quiet moments that no one else can replace. Daniel folds the paper once, not to hide it, but to hold it together, and slips it into the folder with the official form, placing something human inside something structured, and for the first time since this began, he makes a decision that is not written anywhere. He reaches into his wallet, pulls out a card, and sets it on the counter beside Ethan. I am going to file this, he says, his tone calm but certain now. And I am going to make sure it does not get ignored. Ethan looks at the card, then back at Daniel, and though he does not smile, something softer appears in his eyes, something that has been missing since he walked in. Outside, Rex exhales again, a low, quiet sound, and this time it does not feel like waiting, it feels like something shifting. Something beginning to move in a direction that cannot be undone. The station does not change, the same low hum, the same muted voices, the same fluorescent lights that never seem to warm, but something inside it has shifted, something small and almost invisible, like a door left slightly open where it used to be shut. Daniel picks up the folder and holds it for a second longer than necessary, feeling the edge press into his palm as if grounding the decision he has already made. Then he turns and walks past the front desk, not toward the usual processing room, not toward the chain of approvals that would slow everything into silence, but toward a narrower hallway, one that leads to an office most people do not enter without reason. Ethan watches him go, his eyes following every step, not asking, not interrupting, just holding on to the quiet trust he has already given. Outside, Rex shifts his weight again, the leash slack now, the handler no longer pulling him back because there is no need. The dog is not trying to leave, he is waiting, and waiting has a different kind of strength. Minutes pass, not many, but enough to stretch into something longer when you do not know what comes next. Ethan's fingers curl around the edge of the counter again, not out of fear, but habit, something to hold on to while everything else feels uncertain. Then the sound of footsteps returns, steady, measured. Daniel steps back into view, the folder still in his hand, but now there is something else. Something quieter but clearer in his expression, not hesitation, not doubt, but direction. He places the folder down on the counter again, not in front of himself, but in front of Ethan, as if returning something that was never his to keep. We are going to step outside, he says, and there is no question in his voice, no formality, just a simple statement that carries decision inside it. Ethan looks up, a flicker of surprise crossing his face, then something else, something close to hope but still careful, as if it has learned not to arrive too quickly. Daniel gestures gently toward the door, and together they walk, the automatic doors parting again with that same quiet sound, but this time it feels different, like crossing a line instead of just entering a space. The air outside is cooler now, the rain almost gone, leaving behind that faint scent of wet concrete and early morning. Rex is already standing, his posture alert, but not tense, his eyes locking onto Ethan the moment they step through, and something changes in that instant, something immediate and undeniable. The kind of recognition that does not need time to build. The leash falls loose in the handler's hand. Not dropped, just no longer needed, because Rex does not move away. He moves forward, slow at first, one step, then another, until he stands just a few feet from the boy, and for a moment neither of them reaches out, either rushes, because some reunions are not loud, they are quiet, careful, as if both sides are making sure the other is real. Ethan takes one small step closer, his hand lifting slightly, uncertain but willing. And Rex lowers his head just enough to meet it, the contact gentle, familiar, like something that was never truly lost. Daniel watches from just behind them, saying nothing, because there is nothing to say that would not break what is happening, and in that silence, the world feels steady again, not fixed, not perfect, but aligned in a way that makes sense, even if it cannot be explained. For a moment the world holds still around them, not frozen, but softened, like everything unnecessary has stepped back to make room for something that matters more. Ethan's hand rests against Rex's head now, fingers sinking slightly into the thick fur as if confirming what his eyes already believe, and Rex does not pull away, does not hesitate, he leans in just enough to close the distance, a quiet acceptance, a recognition that goes beyond training, beyond commands, something older, something that remembers. Ethan exhales slowly, a breath he has been holding longer than he realized, and though no tears fall, there is a shift in his face, a release, the kind that comes when something lost is found again in a way you did not dare expect. Daniel watches from a step behind, his posture relaxed now, but his eyes steady, following every small movement, every detail. That confirms he made the right choice without needing anyone to say it out loud. The handler clears his throat softly, not to interrupt, but to remind. Sir, we still need authorization for transfer. His voice respectful, measured, the kind that follows protocol even when something human is unfolding in front of him. Daniel nods once, already expecting that moment. He reaches into the folder he brought outside, pulling out the form along with another document, one that carries more weight. Then it appears. I filed a temporary custodial release, he says calmly, his tone even but firm. Pending full review. The handler glances at the paper, then at Daniel, a brief hesitation, then a small nod of understanding, not agreement, but acceptance of a decision made with purpose. Rex shifts slightly, turning his head toward Daniel for a second, as if acknowledging something unspoken, then back to Ethan, staying close, staying where he chooses to be. Daniel steps forward now, closing the distance between them, and kneels just enough to be level with the boy, his voice lower, quieter, meant only for him. This is not permanent yet, he says, not to take anything away, but to anchor it in truth. But it is a start. Ethan nods slowly, absorbing the words, not discouraged, not afraid, just understanding that some things take time, that some bonds have to be proven again in the eyes of others even when they never broke in the first place. Daniel reaches out and adjusts the leash. Not tightening it, just placing it gently into Ethan's hand, a simple movement, but one that carries more meaning than any official signature could. Ethan looks down at it, then back at Daniel, his grip firm. Now, no longer uncertain, and Rex responds instantly, not pulling, not resisting, but aligning himself beside the boy as if he has always been there, as if no time has passed at all. The morning light begins to break through the thinning clouds, casting a faint warmth across the pavement, and for the first time since the boy walked into the station, everything feels like it is moving forward, not perfectly, not completely resolved, but in the right direction, and sometimes that is enough to change everything. The leash rests in Ethan's hand, but it is no longer just a strip of worn leather. It feels like something living now, something that carries weight and memory and a quiet responsibility that does not need to be explained, and Rex walks beside him without being told, matching each small step with calm precision, not as a trained response, but as a choice, as if the space beside the boy is the only place that makes sense anymore. Daniel stands there for a moment longer, watching them begin to move away from the station, not far, just a few steps down the sidewalk where the morning has started to unfold, the sky lifting into a pale gray blue, the rain gone but still lingering in the scent of the air, and for the first time, the silence does not feel heavy, it feels full, the kind that carries meaning instead of absence. The handler gives a quiet nod before turning back toward the building, his role complete for now, leaving behind something that no longer belongs to procedure alone. Ethan stops after a few feet, not because he is unsure, but because something inside him pulls him back for a second. He turns, looking over his shoulder toward Daniel, and there is no need for words, just a look, one that holds gratitude, confusion, and something deeper, something like trust being formed in real time. Daniel meets his gaze and gives a small nod, not formal, not distant, just enough to say that this moment matters on both sides, and Ethan turns forward again, continuing down the sidewalk with Rex at his side, the two of them moving together with a rhythm that feels remembered rather than learned. Minutes pass, not many, but enough for the distance to grow. Enough for the station behind them to become just another building in the background, and yet something about it remains, something invisible that follows them forward. Daniel finally exhales, a breath he did not realize he was holding, and turns back inside, the automatic doors closing softly behind him, sealing the warmth of the interior against the cool morning outside. But the decision does not stay behind, it follows him. Step for step, through the hallway, back to the desk, back to the folder that still rests there. He opens it again, reading through the forms, the official language that tries to define something that cannot be contained in lines and boxes. And then he reaches the page Ethan wrote, the uneven letters, the careful effort, the truth that did not need to be perfect to be real. Daniel pauses there longer than he should, longer than policy allows. And then he does something small, something that no one sees. He removes that page and places it at the very front of the file, not hidden, not buried, but visible, undeniable, because sometimes the most important part of a case is not what is written by the system, but what is written by someone who has nothing left but honesty. Hours later, the station continues as it always does. Calls come in, reports are filed, voices rise and fall in the background, but Daniel moves through it differently now, not slower, not distracted. Just more aware, as if something has shifted in the way he sees the lines he once followed without question. And somewhere beyond the building, beyond the reach of radios and paperwork, a boy and a dog continue walking, not toward something grand, not toward a perfect ending, but toward a place that still remembers them, a place where a worn collar can hang by the door and a quiet presence can fill a room that once felt too empty to stand in. And though nothing has been finalized, nothing stamped or sealed, there is already something real taking shape, something that does not need approval to exist, because sometimes the beginning of a second chance does not arrive with certainty. It arrives with a step, a leash, and the simple decision not to let something go when it still knows where it belongs. Time does not move the way people expect after a moment like that. It does not rush forward with answers or settle neatly into resolution. It stretches, it lingers, it lets small things become important again. And over the next few days, Ethan learns that having Rex beside him is not just a return, it is a quiet rebuilding, step by step, breath by breath. The first morning, the house feels different, not full, not yet, but no longer hollow. Rex moves through each room slowly, not exploring like a stranger, but remembering like someone returning to a place that once made sense, his nose tracing along the edges of furniture, pausing near the doorway where a pair of boots still rests, untouched, and Ethan watches without speaking, standing just behind him, giving space to something he understands without needing to explain. The sunlight filters in through the window in thin lines, catching dust in the air, and for a moment, it feels like time has folded in on itself, like past and present are standing in the same room without arguing over which one belongs. Rex finally settles near the old chair in the corner, the one that still carries the faint imprint of a man who used to sit there at the end of long days, and he lowers himself slowly, not out of exhaustion, but recognition, as if he knows that this is where he is supposed to be. Ethan kneels beside him, his hand resting gently against the dog's shoulder. Not holding, not clinging, just present, and in that quiet contact, something begins to heal, not all at once, not completely, but enough to breathe again. Across town, Daniel sits at his desk with the same folder open in front of him, the forms now moving through channels that do not move quickly, signatures required, evaluations pending, language that delays what the heart has already decided. But he does not rush it. He knows some things need to be done right, not just done fast. And still, he checks on it more often than he needs to, reading through the pages, stopping each time at Ethan's handwriting, that uneven truth that cuts through everything else. Days turn into a week, and the routine begins to form. Ethan walks Rex each morning, not far, just around the block, the leash no longer tight, no longer uncertain. It hangs with a natural ease between them, like it has found its place again. Neighbors begin to notice, some offer small nods, quiet greetings, others simply watch, sensing something meaningful without needing to know the full story. Rex stays close, always close, not because he has to, but because he chooses to, and at night, when the house settles into stillness, he lies near Ethan's bed, not at the door, not guarding, just there, present, a quiet assurance that no one in that house is alone anymore. One afternoon, As the sun dips low and casts long shadows across the street, a car pulls up slowly in front of the house, not loud, not urgent, just steady, and Ethan steps outside, Rex already at his side before he even reaches the door. Daniel steps out of the car, holding the same folder, though now it feels lighter somehow. Less like a burden and more like something completed. Ethan steps slow. As he approaches, not out of fear, but anticipation, the kind that carries both hope and caution in equal measure, Daniel meets him halfway, the distance closing without words, and for a moment, the three of them stand there, the air quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves and the distant hum of a passing car. Daniel kneels slightly, bringing himself level again, just like before. But this time there is no hesitation in his movement, only purpose. He opens the folder and pulls out a single page, cleaner, more official, the kind that carries authority in its form, but even that feels secondary to what it represents. "It is approved," he says simply, his voice calm, steady, but carrying something deeper beneath it, not pride, not relief, something closer to respect. Ethan does not speak right away. He looks at the paper, then at Daniel, then down at Rex, as if making sure this moment is real, that it is not something that will disappear if he looks away too quickly. Rex remains still, but his eyes shift between them, alert, aware, as if understanding that something important has just changed. Daniel extends the paper, but Ethan does not take it immediately. Instead, he steps forward and wraps his arms around Rex, not tightly, not desperately, just enough to hold what has been returned, and Rex leans into him, steady, certain, and in that quiet embrace, the paper becomes secondary, a formality catching up to a truth that has already taken root. Daniel watches, saying nothing, because there are moments that do not need words, only presence, and after a few seconds, Ethan pulls back, his hand still resting on Rex as he finally takes the document, holding it carefully. Not like a piece of paper, but like something earned, something proven. Daniel stands, brushing his hand lightly against his pant leg, a small, almost absent gesture, then looks down at them one last time. "He is yours," he says, and this time there is no condition, no waiting, just a statement that lands with quiet certainty. Ethan nods, not smiling wide, not shouting, just a simple nod that carries everything he cannot put into words. Daniel turns to leave, walking back toward his car, not looking back right away, because he knows some endings are better felt than watched. But just before he reaches the door, he pauses, glancing over his shoulder for a brief second, long enough to see Ethan standing there with Rex at his side, the leash loose, the bond unbroken, and something in that image settles inside him, something that will stay long after the paperwork is forgotten. He gets into the car and drives away slowly. The house growing smaller in the mirror, but the meaning of what happened there only growing clearer. And back on the porch, as the evening settles in, Ethan sits down with Rex beside him, the document resting quietly on the step, untouched for now, because it no longer needs to prove anything. The wind moves softly through the trees, carrying the faint scent of earth and distance, and in that moment, there is no need to rush forward, no need to explain, because some stories do not end with a victory. They end with something quieter, something steadier. Something that feels like grace finding its way into a place that needed it most.